Welcome to today's webinar, Debunking 10 Common Fleet Misconceptions, How to Myth-Bust Your Way to a Modern Fleet, presented by AssetWorks. I'm Jay Cohen, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. I encourage you to ask questions during the webinar at any point, and we will try to address them all. However, if we do not get to yours, don't worry. You will be contacted by email with a response after the event. Our presenters today are Bob Sparks, Senior Industry Consultant, Tom Seaman, Lead Sales Engineer, Dan Walker, UX Manager, and Chris Bassett, Fuel and EV Sales Specialist, all of them with AssetWorks. Now I'll hand it over to the AssetWorks team.
Hello, this is Bob Sparks. It's great to be with you today. Our goal is to debunk some common fleet myths or misconceptions. We'll dive into 10 common fleet myths, and then we'll wrap up with a question and answer section at the end. The myths we're debunking today come from those of us at AssetWorks listening to our customers. And of course, we provide or request to provide solutions for both existing and pending fleet issues. AssetWorks has been supporting the fleet industry for over 40 years. And during that time, we've done countless site visits, business process assessments, and fleet management reviews. We conduct an annual academy for our AssetWorks customers where they can learn new features, discuss fleet trends, and to network with one another. We also attend several fleet industry trade shows every year, and we also conduct one or more special interest groups where development projects are planned each year. Our product users group also submits prioritized lists of improvements for us each year to help us guide our future software releases. So we're going to tackle those 10 myths today. I'm first going to pass the ball to Dan Walker to debunk the first myth of the day.
All right. Thanks, Bob. All right, let's jump into it. Let's tackle that one that's too time-consuming to train my non-tech savvy technicians to use tablets. All right. We're going to start with a brief understanding of what UI UX is, and I'm going to start with a quote from Don Norman. He's one of the godfathers of UX, and it goes as, "No product is an island. A product is more than a product. It is a cohesive, integrated set of experiences." He actually wrote a great book, and the quote comes from that book. It's the design of everyday things. Goes from very interactions from very complex systems, even down to a simple toaster. But there's mainly two parts. There's the user interface. That's where the buttons, the tables, the menus, everything that you would interact with as a user. And then there's the user experience. This is the colors, typography, how all these things blend together to give you that look and feel of the software. The best thing is when they all blend together, it allows the user to complete their tasks with their expected outcome and actually even possibly enjoy the experience. And that way they come back to use that software again and again to complete their tasks in their life or their job. So how does UI UX impact fleet software? If you had software that's developed without UI UX, right? I think we've all used those painful pieces of software where there's complicated workflows. You're also maybe scrolling around the page trying to find buttons, and then there's too many steps to complete a simple task. It's very complicated and cumbersome. And then you have the software that you enjoy using, right? The workflows are simple. It gets you through the screens and your task at an easy pace. The buttons and the tables are all on the screen. The data is there for you, and then the tasks are completed with minimal steps. So, how do we do this at AssetWorks? Bob mentioned some of these things in his intro, where we collect user feedback at our industry events, our own client events like the Academy, where we do a lot of demos and training, and then we even touch base with our sales and professional services because those folks are with the clients day in and day out. And then we actually do client visits. And then especially in those special interest groups or even the clients that are using our software, we'll reach out to them for specific feedback and use that to improve our products. And then we also use the latest software tools that allow us to create quick prototypes and shorten our feedback loop with project managers and clients. And then our UX team also takes into account the accessibility standards such as color blindness, color contrast, and button sizes in our products to make them even more usable. So typically that design solution is going to equal happier technicians, right? And with tablets today and modern modern mobile devices, they've pretty much permeated the industry and even in all of our homes. I'm pretty sure most 5-year-olds at this point know how to use a tablet better than most of us, but there's a reason, right? They're very intuitive, and they have become actually pretty cost-effective to deploy as a replacement to those high-cost desktops, laptops, and even phones and those shared consoles. And because they're tablets, you can pick them up, go into an asset, go into a vehicle, do tests, right? And they're small, but the screen size still allows you to do multiple things on the view. Our latest mobile products support the core workflow of a technician, like creating and updating work orders, responding to service requests, keeping track of their time, and this is all done in real time. So there's actually no more need for timesheets. And speaking of wasted time on things that you don't want to be waiting in line for a shared console or laptop, or manually entering data from those paper forms, which will also be made obsolete because now your technicians have a tablet or a mobile device in their hands and they're inputting the data right then. Our mobile products can actually enable your technicians to spend more time on the asset and less time documenting their work. And a great example of that is Oklahoma City Utilities. They actually implemented Fleet Focus Edge, which is one of our mobile products, and they posted 2 hours of reduced downtime per day in their department. And those quotes in green, those are the core tenets that we focused on when we created our mobile products. And some of them are it fits on the screen. So again, it's responsive. All your data, all the buttons and things are all on the screen, so the technician's not scrolling around finding information. It's simplified workflows. They all fit on the screen, and which makes for easy training. And so that means it's not just for the younger techs, but even those with a lot of experience, and they can just pick it up, right? So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Chris, and he's going to tackle myth number 2.
Great information. Thank you, Dan. So myth number 2, my electrification project is complete after chargers and the electric vehicles arrive. Often we hear from folks that they spend a great deal of time procuring and installing EV infrastructure and electric vehicles. That's not the end of the road for this full EV experience. There are many things yet to be done after procurement. Some items you'll need to consider are things like understanding your overall charging needs, both from a fleet ROI perspective and an internal use perspective. Choosing a utility rate structure that best fits those needs, working to optimize the benefits of different rate structures, determine how you the best the internal billing processes, and last but not least, identify what is the best source to manage all of your newfound charging data. So for many years, we've been helping fleets to track, manage, and monitor liquid fuels. Electricity is a fuel with many of those same management needs. That said, electricity is a fuel unlike any other. When working with electric vehicle charging, there's much more to consider than just what are the rates of the current fuel. You'll now have to be faced with choices like, what is my source of electricity, be it from the grid, solar, or other sustainable means? How do I manage charging knowing that different times and even different locations will have different rates? What is the best rate structure based on my needs? You must take into account things like time of use rates, peak demand charges, and other factors. So electricity does have many more components to consider in the process, but like liquid fuel, it does need to be managed. Speaking of management of fuel, unlike its liquid cousin, whose price is largely out of your control, overall electricity costs can, in some part, be determined by the decisions management makes regarding how, when, and where vehicle charging takes place. So important things to consider, again, are time of use. For example, does each vehicle need to begin charging immediately? Is your use case such that you can take advantage of lower rates in off-peak times? Speed of charging. Is it imperative that every vehicle get the full amount of power, or is slower charging sufficient? Perhaps there are even some that are more critical to keep it 100% than others. Also, which utility rate works best overall, or is it different per location based on your needs? And finally, how to keep overall peak demand charges at a minimum. So here's an example of how time of use decisions can significantly affect the total cost of charging. So note in the first chart that there's 10 vehicles are being charged for 8 hours. 5 of those hours are on peak and 3 hours are off peak. Charging this way brings us to a cost of $416.60 in the example. In the second chart, the customer has chosen to schedule the charging to begin as the off-peak times kick in. So all 8 hours of charging are at the lower rate, and you can see that the total is cut nearly by 50%. Managing time of use carefully is extremely important. In this heavy-duty charging example, we see different rate structures based on general calculations for 50 or so Class 8 vehicles. In the rate type column, you'll see some common options that may be in your decision tree as you choose your best direction. In the first 2 rows, you see details about a rate structure with an incentive called demand holiday. Demand charges may be waived or reduced and then increased over time to help relieve the burden of the initial EV investment. Row 3 depicts a time of use rate type, now with the added peak demand cost factored in as well. And finally, row 4, the demand subscription model, allowing the ability to keep demand costs lower by anticipating your kilowatt usage. So again, having both the data and the tools to help you choose and manage your rate structure choices is also very key in keeping your costs down. So how exactly do you gather, report, and manage all of this data needed to make important EV charging decisions? Well, charger integrations such as AssetWorks Fuel Focus EV are quickly becoming the go-to tool. With the ability to pull key charging metrics through existing integrations, network charging partners like ChargePoint, and SemiConnect, which is now a Blink company, as well as the ability to deploy non-network fleet charging, or what we call behind-the-fence type solutions, provided by AssetWorks directly, our customers now have the ability to not just plan for and implement charging solutions, but also are equipped with the tools to gather the necessary data to make critical decisions about how, what, and when to charge. I hope these few slides have given some good insight on how implementation of charging is just the beginning of your EV charging journey. With that said, I'll pass the ball over to Bob for myth number 3.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to bust the myth that paper forms are the most secure option for drivers. Now, being a baby boomer, I'm very familiar with the classroom excuse, "My dog ate my homework." Even my Gen Z kids could use that excuse. But what excuse do kids use today, the millennials? Certainly the majority of assignments are completed online, and once submitted, they're secured. I don't believe that paper forms are more secure. I just did a management review recently, in fact, where all kinds of driver vehicle inspection reports, commonly referred to as DVARs, were scattered all around the dispatcher's desk. Some forms were even on the floor, and when I picked a few up, I couldn't even read some of them. They were illegible. I also can often question the accuracy of some paper forms. For example, I'm very lucky to live in Southern California where the weather is always nice. But what about doing a DVAR when it's a snowstorm or it's pouring down rain? Am I really doing my pre or post-trip inspection from inside my cab? Am I doing it all? Am I backdating and filling out my forms later? Electronic forms are immediate and real-time. There are no legibility issues. They even have spell check. They don't get lost, and hopefully they're behind your firewall and don't get hacked. They can also include images, speech-to-text, and validated lists of values. On the slide here, you can see an example of one line of an electronic checklist. It's an item. The organization's checklist for any inspection or DVAR can walk an operator or technician through any standard list of questions. Signatures can be required and saved. Failed results can generate an automatic service request. Even failed checklist items can be configured to notify certain people or roles when certain results are entered. Units that are deemed unsafe to operate, or sometimes referred to as being red tagged, can be denied dispatch until resultant repairs are completed and validated. All right, I'm now passing the ball to Tom Seaman to debunk the next myth.
Thank you, Bob. So myth number 4, the goals of the departments we service are different than fleet's goals. So some of the most important goals are actually shared across your organization, and that includes some of the most important ones like creating efficiencies, aligning with your IT department, and ultimately reducing costs. So the real question is, how do you align these goals with all these different departments involved? So we're going to start with creating efficiencies. So the challenges here typically involve multiple departments having to share a single platform or different platforms for every single department. And that basically means that, with shared platforms, some groups are going to be missing functionality. On the other hand, separate systems are not going to integrate where they need to be. So this can be solved, obviously, by finding a comprehensive single solution for all the departments, and by taking the lead, Fleet can actually get exactly what they need and ensure that no other departments are going to have to compromise functionality. So next, the single solution creates better alignment with IT. Pretty straightforward. I mean, less platforms means immediate reduction in IT's responsibilities. Having one solution means it's easier to implement, train, and support that solution. Your reporting databases are going to be consolidated, so that's going to make it easier to pull data, run reporting. And any integrations across other supporting platforms are also going to be consolidated with that one single solution. And then finally, reducing costs. So very simply, the more departments that can utilize that single solution, the less each department has to pay in maintenance costs. And any cost-effective comprehensive solution should be offering unlimited users, unlimited assets of any type, and also unlimited departments. So with that, next Chris is going to talk about myth number 5.
Thank you, Tom. So myth number 5, there is no rush to claim LCFS credits. So before I debunk the myth, how about we take a second to discuss just exactly what an LCFS credit is. LCFS, or Low Carbon Fuel Standard credits, can be known by different names in different states and locations, but generally speaking, LCFS credits are a market-based program that allows users of alternative fuel to generate credits that they can then register and receive funds for towards additional carbon reduction programs. So today, one LCFS credit is equal to or represents 1 metric ton CO2 equivalent. So as fleets utilize low emissions programs like EV charging, they're building their LCFS credit bank to register and receive those funds back to spend. That said, this program is a use it or lose it scenario. LCFS credits are not retroactive and are time sensitive. Generally speaking, you have about 90 days after quarter ends to register for your credits. So how can AssetWorks help our customers to ensure they take full advantage of those credit programs? Well, we can help in gathering and reporting the necessary data to register for those credits. AssetWorks can assist in spending those credits on solutions that can generate both new revenues and even qualify for additional credits in the future. And we can help source 100% renewable electricity for fleets charging projects. All of these programs and different approaches help address the high capital cost of fleet electrification and continue to reach ever-changing fleet sustainability goals. I'm now going to hand the ball back over to Bob for myth number 6.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to actually take it for Bob. I'm going to look at myth number 6. I can't compete with other shops. to hire younger technicians. So let's go over what are younger techs looking for today. I mean, everybody's looking for stability and financial security, but the main thing is around career growth opportunities. And I wanted to share an interesting fact. In 2018, over 3.5 million Americans quit their jobs every month, and that was the highest rate since 2001, and it continued through the pandemic, otherwise known as the Great Resignation. I think most people have heard that phrase. So, but according to that survey that was actually conducted through LinkedIn, 94% of employees actually said that they would have actually stayed with their company longer if they just invested in helping them to learn. And that actually is the same for Gen Z and millennials. They said that learning is the number one thing that actually makes them happy to come to work. And over 27% said that they wouldn't leave their job as long as their employer focused on career growth opportunities. So, and also within the day-to-day, you need to have workflows that make sense, and eliminate processes and standing in line, like waiting for, like, again, those shared consoles, sharing. You're just wasting time, and that's not what the younger technicians want to see. They want to see more modern technology. So how to make your fleet stand out? Your employees each have their own device, and then they come to work and they're expected to share one. It's pretty much a disconnect, and it's not a really great experience waiting in line, trying to input data or your timesheet or request a part, something like that. Younger technicians expect to see that modern technology in the workplace. And that's actually a fact that then you can use to attract and retain those new employees. Our products like Edge or EAM and Fleet Connect can actually enable your mobile workforce within those tablets that you're deploying within your techs. But then also focusing on training and certifications like ASE certifications, CNG tank inspections, or even future-proofing as most fleets electrify with the EBT certifications. That's a way that you can, again, invest in growth opportunities for those younger technicians. And retaining that talent by using the latest tech in the workplace, and again, investing in employees' professional growth will help to bolster your culture and make your fleet stand out. And with that, I'm going to throw it back to Bob, and he's going to talk about myth number 7.
Thanks, Dan. I'm now going to bust the myth that spreadsheets are a cost-effective alternative to fleet software. I had a utility customer in the not-too-distant past that failed an internal security audit because invoice approvals were being tracked on a spreadsheet updated via shared network drive. The auditor found that a shared network drive opened the organization up to a security risk and demanded that invoice approvals be accomplished in the fleet software, which resides behind their firewall and is only accessed via a VPN connection. At AssetWorks, we try to help our customers eliminate the need for spreadsheets by keeping all fleet-related data in the fleet system. You can't manage what you don't measure, and it's far easier to report if all your fleet data is in one system. It's our philosophy at AssetWorks that if a fleet is doing stuff using a spreadsheet, then that provides us with an opportunity to supply an additional solution to our customers. Spreadsheets do have some inherent weaknesses. Version control, for example. Multiple users can't update data simultaneously, and spreadsheets don't enforce process workflow. An integrated real-time solution is secure. Data elements have to pass validation rules, which helps eliminate bad data. And entries can enforce workflow, automatically taking a user to the next step in the process. And very importantly, data elements are auditable. All right, and next I'm going to bust the myth that good fleet management can't prevent accidents. A 2016 National Highway Transportation Safety Administration study found that 94 to 96% of all auto accidents were preventable. The most common preventable collisions could be attributed to speeding, aggressive or reckless driving, distracted driving, chemical impairment, and drowsy driving. Tracking collisions real-time and electronically provides, but it's not limited to, the following advantages. Photos can be taken and uploaded at the collision scene. Driver, witness, passenger, and victim information can be recorded on location. The collision itself acts as a project in the software, so all repair estimates, costs, claims, subrogation, etc. can be tracked and attributed to that specific collision. Also, securing and finalizing collision incidents can help your software be credible if you have to go to court with that data. Very importantly, having a documented and communicated fleet safety program will not only improve safe operation of your fleet, but will also help ensure proper response to collision events. Utilizing smart applications with connected devices and/or telematics integrations will help improve collision information, such as speeding, driver behavior, and collision location. All right, now I already debunked myth number 3 about paper forms. That debunked myth totally applies to paper collision forms. Even though an electronic collision form might not be able to improve the artistic talent of your drivers, by the way, I do take full credit for the drawing on the screen there, but electronic forms allow for detailed logging, photo and video capture, and total integration with the fleet system. Okay, now let's go to myth number 9. If a vehicle is running, it's fine to keep in the fleet. I don't think that's true. I think fleets should always strive to ensure that vehicles are properly specified, utilized by the correct employees at the right times, in the right locations, for the right amount of time, and the job and specified for the job task associated with those vehicles. When one speaks of right-sizing their fleet, they're often speaking of determining the correct size and fleet mix to fill their needs. Too many assets cause a monetary burden, and too few assets can cause service shortages and unhappy customers. The core reason for right-sizing is capital reduction, especially nowadays where, example, 40 to 50% of many fleets' budget goes simply to owning vehicles. With the standard cost of bucket trucks, for example, averaging between $150 and $300,000 and rising, there becomes a very clear return on investment with acquiring the correct number and the properly specified vehicles. The benefits of right-sizing include maintenance cost reductions, optimized vehicle usage, fuel conservation, reduced emissions, especially now because of growing government mandates and societal pressures. Fleet managers are beginning to evaluate whether or not they need as many vehicles in their current process or whether they should pursue fleet electrification. If they can right-size their fleet, they can potentially decrease their unnecessary fleet count and therefore reducing their overall emissions. Right-sizing can also create capital budget savings, and having efficiency metrics allow for monitoring utilization. A true life example here, one of our fleet managers recently successfully negotiated a reduction in law enforcement patrol vehicles by guaranteeing an availability percentage. The fleet manager was able to get the police chief to agree to a fleet reduction when the fleet manager was able to accurately report an availability percentage of greater than 95% for a specified period of time, which I believe was a year. One way to evaluate your fleet for right-sizing is to speak to the people that actually work on and those that use those vehicles. Another way is understanding your telematics and fleet analytic data. Fleet managers need to understand the daily usage rate and the needs of the vehicles and assets within their fleet. Okay, I'm now going to pass the ball back to Tom Seaman to bust our last myth of the day.
Thanks, Bob. So, myth 10, fleet's functionality needs are different than that of our customers. So while fleet does obviously have their own unique needs in a system and the system functionality, there's a lot of functionality that can cross over and work together with your customers. And that comes back to that single solution that we're talking about that's comprehensive. So first, mobile apps. That solves a lot of things, especially work management requirements. So for fleet, that can include things like road calls. It also then works for public works, so they can do their work orders on their assets, which happen to be fixed. So they need a mobile solution to go to their assets. Mobile apps also provide driver solutions for things like service request reporting, performing pre- and post-trip inspections, viewing authorized vendors for sublet work that they might be able to do. There's motor pool. That functionality obviously lets fleet manage vehicles and equipment pools, and also gives then your customers the ability to make reservations. GPS telematics provides accurate and frequent meter updates. It also provides automated alerts and even service requests for diagnostic trouble codes that trigger. And all while providing the supported departments with driver behavior, geofencing, and other functionality. Another piece to that is the ability to track assignments and reporting of items. So things like who has what tools, equipment, uniforms, PPE, and that can be tracked for users, departments, locations at any level. So Fleet can take advantage of that as well as any other group. And then finally, fully integrated inventory management. That's not just for Fleet to manage their parts, but also for other departments to have the ability to manage their parts and materials inventories. And now here's Bob for the wrap-up.
Thanks, Tom. All right, hopefully we've answered some questions about some common fleet myths and showed you that your fleet software can assist in facilitating your fleet operation. But just because we've debunked some of those common myths, that doesn't mean that more myths won't pop up if they haven't already. It's to be expected, especially as fleet technology continues to evolve at its current rate. The most important thing you can do as a fleet professional today is to continue to ask questions. Question the status quo. Maybe you can connect with neighboring fleets to share insights and best practices. And as always, the AssetWorks team is ready to help provide solutions. In our 40-plus year history, we've developed the top solutions to answer the fleet industry's questions and solve its many challenges. So I invite you to see our solutions for yourself and schedule a custom demo of our fleet software suite, which includes a lot of what we mentioned today, like apps for technicians and drivers, EV charge management, telematics, and much more. With that being said, I think we're ready for our Q&A section. So let's look at some questions.
Okay, Bob, thank you. We do have some time left, so there were a couple questions that came in, and as a reminder, you can put those questions in, and we'll get them, try to get them answered for you. First question, this one's for Bob. I think Bob would answer this one. Can you move all our data that we have in spreadsheets into your software?
Yeah, any data where there's a corresponding element in the fleet system can be converted in. And more importantly, even if data elements don't exist in whatever spreadsheet you're using, for example, you can create those data elements in the software and then convert them in, which will make them more secure, real-time, validated, with all those things I talked about on my myth busting.
Okay, great. I have another question, I believe, for you as well, Bob. What are some of the KPIs your software uses around fleet utilization?
Good one. 4 that I can think of right off the top of my head. One would be department utilization outliers. So, you determine by department what their utilization ought to be, and the ones that are underutilized or overutilized would be reported upon. Another would be average asset utilization to help the fleet manager or fleet analyst even determine what your utilization ought to be or where it is. A very common one is low use assets. So it just kind of jumps right out at you which assets aren't being used that you could consider either pooling or maybe getting rid of, or something that maybe you should just lease or rent when you need them. And then assets with really high usage. There's got to be a reason for that. So, maybe in that case you might need more, or maybe they're not specified correctly.
Okay, I believe this question for Dan. Dan, are you seeing shop floors move from workstations to shared tablets or to one tablet per technician?
Yeah, thanks. I think it was actually the first client visit when I started working for AssetWorks about 5 years ago. I went to a client and they were just moving from a shared console to a tablet. And then also listening to Bob talk about one of his recent client visits, City of LA just distributed, I think it was 148 tablets for their technicians. So there is a definitely concentrated move to go away from the shared console. And then the thing that the tablets do is obviously make their workforce more mobile, being able to get inside a vehicle, do your DVIR right on your tablet. And again, like what I mentioned in my presentation is they're very intuitive, they're very easy to use, and accessible for most people.
Hey, Dan, let me jump in for just a second on that one. I mean, one of the big advantages, too, of having a technician with a tablet is, say you've got a PM checklist or something that you're doing. It's so much more handy to have that right in your hand as opposed to having to go to a shared workstation, which might have several technicians queued up, and then you have to wait to enter that data.
And I forgot to also mention that you can take pictures very easily with a tablet, and then also speech to text. So your technicians no longer have to write in all of their notes. And like if Bob had mentioned, there's spell check and spell correct on there, so you don't have to worry about trying to decipher what somebody meant in their notes.
All right, great. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for detailing all that. Next question, I believe this one would be for Tom. For the purposes of cost sharing, what additional functionality does an application need to have for other departments like Public Works and Facilities, Parks and Rec to get on board?
Great, thanks. Yeah, so that comprehensive solution that we're talking about is going to need a couple different things. The two main ones being GIS and a mobile app that works disconnected, and I'll expand on that a little bit. So GIS stands for Geographic Information System. Esri's kind of owns the market there more or less. Our application actually has an out-of-the-box integration with Esri. But what that does is it provides a spatial mapping view of all of those assets that are fixed. So Public Works goes out, they got to flush a hydrant, they know where it is, they can go to it spatially, use maps to manage that. And so that's vital and very important. The other piece to that is a mobile app that works disconnected, and that's because as you get into certain parts of a city, county, state, you're going to have dead zones if you're on a cellular network. You may not have Wi-Fi in a certain part of a building or a basement. So that's important. And again, the crossover functionality is, okay, well, yeah, Public Works might use that, but now Fleet also has the app, and they can do road calls, and you don't have to worry about connectivity. They can access all their information, complete their work, and when they get back to the shop, they regain connectivity. It automatically pushes that data back to the database. Okay,
excellent. We'll keep going with the questions here. I believe this one, Chris, might be the best answer. Do you recommend one network for EV chargers or multiple networks?
Yeah, it's actually a great question. So really, so far, we haven't really seen anyone pick just one network charging provider in. So as fleets get started, they may have started with someone like a ChargePoint or SemiConnect, and they've been around for quite some time, as most people probably know those names. But the way that AssetWorks is going to market is we have our partnerships, right? So we want to be as agnostic as possible. So we want to partner with the key folks in the industry, but then also offer to our fleet customers solutions that solve all of their business needs, right? So for instance, you may have charging needs where both your fleet and the public need to have access to a charger, right? So you may go with a specific charging network that can provide that need. You may then also have the need for behind the fence charging, we call it, right? Which is, maybe I just ordered 30 new EV vehicles for my fleet. They need to park at a location that is only accessible for my fleet. And I want a lower cost solution there, but I still need to manage and monitor that. And so what we're seeing today is most fleets are probably going to have today, and maybe well into the future, a blended source of EV charging networks.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Thank you for that, Chris. This one, I believe, Tom, can you comment on enterprise management softwares such as SAP S4 that are encroaching on and attempting to replace fleet management softwares? They're saying that they're getting pressure to align under a single asset management software solution at an enterprise level for efficiency's sake. I know it's pretty long. Hope that made sense to you.
No, it makes total sense. In fact, it's in complete alignment with actually, I was at FleetCon and presenting, and I did a whole presentation titled "Providing Other Departments Your Solution Before You're Provided Theirs," and I think that fits right into what you're asking about here. These large systems like SAP and there's a few others out there, they are very powerful. They do a lot of things, but they're also kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. And especially when it comes to fleet functionality, the fleet piece always seems to be an afterthought in there. It does the bare minimum basics. And then it really kind of comes down internally to politics and who has what leverage as far as who has dibs on what system you're going to get. So kind of back to one of the other points I was making earlier in the presentation, it really comes down to you taking the lead and being the one to provide that option and say, hey, and obviously not to sound salesy and plug our software, but that's why we built it out. We have that strong foundation, 40 plus years in fleet management, and then realizing that it was easier for us to go that route and expand into those other areas like facilities, parks and rec, you name it, anywhere that you're going to have public works with fixed assets. And so knowing what's required of these other departments, talking with them about, what they need and being able to provide them the solution is the key. And I don't know how far along you guys are in that process, but there are systems out there where you guys aren't going to have to compromise on that. And some of those things to look for, like I said, GIS integration, disconnected mobile offering, being able to manage point, linear, and boundary assets are all important, and that's what makes that comprehensive solution. But with our fleet foundation, you get what you need, and you're not having to have the other groups compromise.
Okay, that's good advice there. The next question is for, I think, Bob. Bob, can you talk about on-site business process improvement service you provide?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. What we do with our business process assessment service is we go visit our customers. We interview, the fleet team, a lot of times some of their principal customers, find out what their pain points are, maybe things that aren't being done in the application that might be brought into it. We look at the entire AssetWorks solution, suite of solutions. A lot of times our customers, especially ones that have been with us for quite some time, don't keep up really with all the new features that we have. So we address, what's out there to be used. But we look at all the basic business processes, like how do you schedule maintenance, or how does work flow through the workshops, or how do I replenish stock parts, or how do I get non-stock parts, or how do I acquire or specify or purchase or dispose of assets? How do I handle collisions, things like that? And in discussion with the customer, we come up with detailed process flows that address any of the systems that the fleet, folks use or customers, and help optimize those business processes to reduce the amount of clicks that an end user does, with the philosophy, the best case scenario of one data element in one system and one person, one system. And that's always the goal. Can't always get there, but how do we get there with the least clicks possible? And that's really the goal. Okay,
thank you for that. Next question for Chris, I believe this one would be good for you. Regarding EV implementation, what is the best way to know what charger is best for our different fleet needs?
Yeah, good question, and one that comes up in almost every conversation, to be honest. So part of the answer is simple, begin with the end in mind. So a lot of what we discuss is, what what is the ultimate end goal of your overall solution, or even just that specific charger, right? So for instance, I was on site with a customer a couple weeks ago. They have a couple different challenges. One is they've been given grant money for public-facing chargers, or a charger that sits out in front of as I recall, maybe a library, and they're getting government grant money for that, and that has to be available for public use and their internal fleet use, right? So sometimes that drives how you choose what charger. So in that case, a networked charger that gives you good access and the public has access to use as well. But they also had, kind of alluding to in my previous answer, they also had a purchase of other EVs coming. And so we did a walkthrough of their parking garage and tried to identify some of the very basics of what would they need to be charging, where would they need to be sitting, the best use of the electricity existing at the site. And so sometimes we need to bring in industry experts or some third-party folks to talk about infrastructure. But again, it's beginning with the end in mind. Most of the customers we talk to are very keen on finding out who we work with as a partnership and what already integrates into our fuel-focused EV platform. So we're trying to expand that as much as we can so that we can give every option that we can to a customer. So it's not a perfectly simple answer, except we start with the end in mind, right? What is the end use of that particular charger? And sometimes the vehicles that'll be charging there, of course, will play a part, right? So the new Ford Lightning may take a little bit more than some of the smaller vehicles. And of course, if you have a transit bus, it may take a DC fast charger or something. So all those things are things we consider, we help with, we can kind of pair with our customers and get answers for.
Okay, great. All right, let's move on to the next question for Dan, I believe. What kinds of tablets and/or cases are typical in a shop environment? Concerns about ruggedization.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I'll start out with what kind of tablet. It's pretty much almost like a 50-50 split right now. I would say that in the past, Android tablets would probably be considered mainly on the cost point because they're usually cheaper than the iOS devices. But recently, the iOS devices have come down a bit, so they're almost pretty even. And then as far as size of tablet, I would probably look at something like a 10-inch tablet. One one of the smaller, they're called like phablets in the past or things like that, because you still want a good screen size for your technicians to be working on, because when you're working in a mobile device, you still have sometimes the keyboards that pop up, and they'll minimize the amount of real estate that your data can display on, things like that. As far as cases, I think they're a little bit all over the place, I guess, based on what's available and based on where they are in the world and what's accessible to them. But yeah, most of them do wrap them in hard cases for their technicians, and even having like a protective screen on top with some of these cases, mainly because technicians, when you have greasy fingers and things, it's obviously easier to clean off or maybe even replace the cover rather than taking a damaged tablet to get repaired somewhere. But I think I might pass it over also to Tom a little bit, because he's more on the EAM side, or enterprise asset management side of things, and he may have a different opinion as far as what they take out to the field.
Yeah, really, it's kind of taster's choice with that. There's a lot of different types of cases, and even with that in mind too, they may not necessarily have it in hand, even out in the field, ongoing. They may, in the truck, pull up the task they're about to do, and then go ahead and hit the start button to start real-time labor, and then they'll leave the tablet maybe in the truck and go do what they need to do. Or they have it temporarily to locate the asset, maybe update whatever notes they need to, and then it's going back in. So varying degrees of what you need as far as ruggedized devices, and kind of back to Dan's comment is like what the use case is for it. You know, if they're just in the shop, maybe it doesn't need to be as ruggedized. If you're going to be doing road calls, if you're going to be, you know, a public works department, you know, working on your fixed assets, you might need more ruggedization than not. I will say though, in my experience, I've had customers that were like, hey, we got a good deal on these white Chromebooks, but we didn't get any cases for them. That's probably not a good approach. So any protection's better than none. It's just a matter of trying to figure out what that end user workflow is going to be.
And one real quick thing to add, to Tom jarred my memory there. But it was one other consideration: if you're mainly in the shop and you have good Wi-Fi, maybe you can get away with just Wi-Fi devices, right? But if you definitely have your technicians out traveling or any need for travel, it definitely would need a data plan for it. Especially, you know, some places don't still have the best coverage. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, all good points there. Okay, the next question for Bob. Someone's asking how they can schedule a demo of the mobile solution for the shop floor.
Okay, good question. I would say if you're an existing AssetWorks customer, to just notify your account rep and say you want a demo and what you want it for. If you're not an existing customer, then I would recommend going to our website, which is assetworks.com/fleet. And there's a button right on it to request a demo. So just click on that. You could also email us, and on that assetworks.com/fleet, pretty much any of the email addresses there will get you to a demo.
Okay, yeah, that helped. That's a good information there. Well, looks like that's all the time we have for today. Just want to remind people, if anyone asked a question that wasn't answered, we'll be following up individually after this webinar. We hope that you all enjoyed today's webinar, and I want to again thank Bob, Tom, Dan, Chris, and AssetWorks for today's presentation. I also want to mention that this webinar will be available on demand on the Government Fleet website, and that's at governmentfleet.com/webinars. Thank you, and we hope you have a great day.